know that, there we go. We are now officially at the top of the hour. I would like to call to order the Salem Kaiser Area Transportation Study Policy Committee for Tuesday, September 26, 2023. And we'll go through roll for the record. And we'll start with in-person with Maria Hinojos-Pressy.
Maria Hinojos-Pressy, representing the Salem Kaiser School District.
Thank you.
Sarah Duncan, alternate with the Salem Area Mass Transit Board.
Kevin Cameron, Marion County Commissioner.
Kathy Clark, Mayor of Kaiser.
Anthony Gamallo, TKS Associates.
Jenna Bogert with DKS Associates.
And Lacy Brown with DKS.
Dobrinich with the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments.
Kim Sapinar with SCADS.
Okay, on the screen, Councilor Phillips.
Trevor Phillips, appointed from City of Salem, Counselor for Ward 3.
Commissioner Mordhorst. Lyle.
What are we looking at?
I don't know.
Is that his,
I'm not sure what the
is that
camera.
his ceiling?
I think so.
We'll come back to you, Lyle. Mike.
Yeah, Mike Jaffe, MPO Plan Director, and sorry I can't be there. As most of you know, I have COVID, so I'm there in spirit.
Thank you for not sharing, and we hope you feel better soon. Anna.
Anna Henson, ODOT Area Manager, and I too am sorry I'm not there in person today. I don't have COVID. I tested negative, but I've not been feeling well, and so I thought I wouldn't spread my germs to you all today.
Much appreciated. Not sharing is caring. Brendan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon Williams, ODOT Region 2, Area 3 Planner.
Sadie.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sadie Carney, Transit Board Director for Subdistrict 3.
Thank you. Jenna.
Jenna's here.
Oh, Jenna's here. Okay. And
Double logged in.
you're double. Okay. And same with Mark.
Hello, everyone. Bart Bernard, Region 2 Principal Planner.
And Jenna.
And Shoki is from Chariots.
I'm sorry, who?
Shoki.
Shoki. Okay. Shoki.
Hey, yeah, yeah. Good afternoon. This is Shofi Olazum, and I'm the Chief Planning and Development Officer at Chariots.
Awesome. Okay, did I miss anybody? All right, well, thank you all very much.
I don't know if Chris French.
should be, Chris French.
Chris French, I'm the Service Planning Manager here.
Chris,
Not here.
yeah, we couldn't hear you, at least in the room.
Okay, and who is Chris with? Does anybody know?
Sure.
You are, okay,
Chariot.
Chariot. Thank you.
Who's
Yeah,
Mark
Chris-
Bernard?
with ODOT.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. The first order of business is approval of the policy committee minutes from August 22nd. Were there any additions or corrections? Motion to approve as presented.
I move to approve.
I'm going to give it to Commissioner Cameron and the second to Maria Hinojos-Pressy. Huh?
That works.
Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Public comment this time is provided for members of the public to address the policy committee. And is there anyone from the public on here today? Everybody identified as being part of an organization. Okay, let's go to the Cordon Kuebler Road study. And just for the record, I want to let people know that item E is going to be postponed and to a later date. We originally thought October, if it looks like it's going to be November. So just to let you know how this is going to roll out today. So let's go with Janelle, Lacy, Anthony, and folks from DKS and Marion County, Cordon Kuebler Road. We'll turn it over to you all to run this.
Do you want to do an intro or do you just want to jump in?
Well, sure. Yeah. So Janelle Shanahan, Marion County Public Works. Yeah, we've been spending the last year and a half, I believe, on this study. DKS was hired as our consultant, and they're here to present the findings, what we came up with.
Great. All right. And do you want to share? Or do you want us to share?
Whichever you're most comfortable with, I'm happy to share. This.
Okay.
Okay, but I wanna.
Oops, it's that one.
There we go. We'll make it pretty. Oh, now that I did that, let me share it.
All right, there we go. Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Lacy Brown. I was the project manager for DKS Associates, leading the Kuebler corridor plan. I also have with me Janelle Bogert, who helped on the project, as well as Anthony Gamallo, who was previously with the city of Salem and was part of our project management team during the course of the project. He's also here to provide the city's perspective on the plan and kind of serve dual roles here today. So the next slide. So we're going to start just going through kind of the background of the project, the goals and the objectives and the process that we went through. So this is the study area. Sorry for the scale, it's a really big corridor. So this, we call it the Cordon Kuebler corridor. It also includes the very north side of our corridor along Hazel Green Road. So it goes from 99E at Hazel Green Road across the top end of that corridor and then turns down Cordon Road for the full extent of Cordon Road, where it transitions to Kuebler Boulevard and back around to 36th Avenue on the south side. So not quite I-5 to I-5. That kind of outer loop is our study area for this plan. So thinking through kind of the original intent for this project, there was a very clear need for a shared vision and some consistent guidelines for access management along the corridor. It does span different parts of Marion County and City of Salem, and there's a lot of transition between the two. And really the goal is to ensure that the corridor will function safely and efficiently into the future. So we had 6 main goals that drove the project, and these were established at the beginning of the project as part of our project management team, our advisory committee, as well as input from the public. So our main goals were safety, to enhance the safety for all modes of travel on the corridor, ensuring efficient movement of both people and goods along the corridor, connecting users to destinations within and beyond the study area, supporting existing industry and enhancing the physical, social, and economic well-being of the residents in local area, making informed and responsible stewardship of financial resources, and finally, providing consistency with adopted plans and collaboration amongst all of the jurisdictions. One thing I do want to mention is I know that this corridor includes the potential future interchange at Oregon 22 and Cordon Road. That interchange has been studied several different times in many previous studies. So this project specifically was focusing on a plan for the corridor with or without that interchange being built. So we did not assume that the interchange would be there. We're really trying to make sure that this project would lay out a vision for the corridor either way. So next I'll step through kind of the process that we went through as part of the project.
Does look like there's a hand up. I don't know. If
Director Carney has their hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Clark. I was just curious, there was a bullet on a previous slide and I was just hoping for clarification. There was something about, there was kind of a mixed message between, I wasn't sure if existing industry, are we supposed to be framing our minds around industrial zoning, or is existing industry sort of like inclusive of all kind of commercial activity going on?
Yeah, so it's basically all existing land uses along the corridor, existing businesses, residences,
Okay.
everything out there today.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding our aim
Yeah.
here.
Follow up. So the land uses that, I mean, you have land uses that are in operation today, but there are planned for on the Salem, you know, inside the UGB side. So that was considered in this. So if it's not yet developed, but it is zoned for X,
Yep.
that has been factored in. Okay, thank you.
All right, one more. There we go. Perfect. So this figure shows kind of the main 8 steps that we went through for the project. The first step, of course, was establishing that vision and goals that we just talked through. We then did a detailed evaluation of the existing safety, multimodal safety and operations needs along the corridor. And then we looked at that future 20-year potential need for vehicle specific demand, since that's what we have in our travel demand models. And so that's where we took into account future development along the corridor based on the zoning that and what would be allowed. We also had 2 open house events, which I'll touch on in a little bit more detail in a moment. From that, all of that information, we developed 3 different alternatives for potential cross sections and traffic control along the corridor. And then we took that back to the public and used their input as well as our scoring criteria from the goals of the project to settle on a selected preferred alternative, and then use that to then develop a prioritized project list. So in looking at that future 2043 vehicle traffic demand, there was a lot of different alternatives that we looked at. And we used the SCATS travel demand model to look at these different scenarios and figure out which one should be the basis for our analysis. And so there was 4 different scenarios we looked at, all for the year 2043. One of them was assuming that all of the planned improvements in adopted TSPs for the city and county were implemented, assuming that as our baseline. And then we looked at that scenario with and without an interchange. And then we also looked at assuming kind of existing infrastructure, if those projects did not get put into place as outlined in the TSPs, with and without an interchange. And so we looked at how traffic volumes differed between all of those different scenarios. And we evaluated all of the intersection operations along the whole corridor for those 4 scenarios. And then one that we landed on and moved forward into our development of our alternatives was assuming that, yes, all of the TSP projects would be built and the cross-section, intersection improvements, traffic control improvements, all of that was in place, and that there was not an interchange constructed. And as I mentioned before, that was our kind of conservative assumption. We did look very closely at the impacts of an interchange going in and what that would do to travel volumes along the entire corridor.
Can you speak to where that interchange?
At Oregon 22. Yeah, Cordon Road at Oregon 22. And really the volume changes with and without the interchange were very isolated and focused around the interchange itself. They didn't carry through to the entire extent of the corridor. And so the ultimate implications of whether an interchange was or was not assumed in our analysis had a pretty small effect on the overall plan. And so we elected to go with a more conservative approach since it's not a funded project. It doesn't have any funding identified for it in the future, and assumed that there would not be an interchange for this specific plan.
Question.
Yes.
Does it assume rebuilding the overpass though, because it is undersized and blind rise?
So it does not assume that as the baseline, but there is a project identified as that is a need in this plan, and it's identified as a need for the future to improve that.
Anna, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
No, I'm good. I thought I had a question, but I figured it out. Thank you.
All right. And then Trevor, Counselor Phillips has his hand.
It was mainly to, excuse me, it was mainly to second your comments, Chair Clark. You know, that overpass where Cordon Road goes over 22 is all the things you said. It's not safe or adequate for, you know, this corridor. So thank you for highlighting it.
Yes, correct.
I was listening.
I'm raising my hand back up.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, can you back up a slide, please? Down where you're identifying the definition of interchange, it says an interchange at the junction of Highway 22 and Kuebler. Is that Kuebler there, or is it?
So that should be Cordon Road. Good catch. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So after we evaluated all of the needs along the corridor, we came up with 3 different design alternatives. The main differences, so alternatives 1 and 2 had essentially the same cross section. They were 4-lane roadways widening out to 4 lanes with a center raised median, and enhanced bicycle pedestrian facilities on both sides of the roadway. And so that cross section was primarily the same in both alternatives 1 and 2. The main difference was the traffic control. So alternative 1 assumed traffic signals at all of the intersections. Alternative 2 looked at roundabouts where they were feasible along the corridor as that traffic control. And then alternative 3 was what we called our bicycle pedestrian centric alternative, where we did not expand the vehicle capacity along Cordon Road. We did widen the road within the right-of-way available, specifically to enhance bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Like this is showing separated bicycle lanes, much wider shoulders and multi-use paths, but that did not add capacity.
On the third one, so what would be the transit or the control mechanism that you said? Because 1 was signal, 2 was roundabout, 3 was.
Yeah, so this third one was a mix of both traffic signals and roundabouts, wherever they were feasible as well. Thank you. Okay. So we took those 3 alternatives. Like I said, we brought them to the public, received a lot of great feedback from the public in our open house number 2. We had about 170 people complete online or in-person surveys. We had both online and in-person open house events. And the in-person event, we had about 60 people attend that. Most people were residents along the corridor. And then we used both feedback from the public during that time, as well as our selection criteria from the project goals. So looking at safety, mobility, connectivity, economic development, all of those goals that we listed, as well as looking at the feasibility of those projects and making sure, looking at kind of the funding potential of those different alternatives. And then of course, input from the member agencies from both the county and the city. And then looking at kind of where we landed with our selected preferred alternative, it was kind of a hybrid of all 3. It was where we ended up. So the very north end, I'm going to kind of go through this corridor piece by piece, and Jenna's handing out a hard copy of this for those that are in the room, and we can email out the hard copy to those on the phone. But this is looking at just Hazel Green Road at the very north end. Our intention here was to not add capacity where it wasn't critical. And so Hazel Green Road would maintain a 3-lane cross section and have the addition of buffered bicycle lanes on both sides of the roadway, and then a multi-use path on the south side of the roadway. So that would be that full length from Highway 99 to Cordon Road along Hazel Green. Next slide. And then moving down from the north to the south along Cordon Road between Hazel Green and Silverton Road. Again, maintaining 2 vehicle travel lanes, adding the center raised median, widening the shoulder on both sides of the roadway. And then on the west side, on the city side of Cordon Road, having a wide multi-use path for both bicyclists and pedestrians to travel on. And again, this difference between having the multi-use path on the west side and the very wide shoulder on the east side is just that kind of county, city, urban, rural. Cordon Road is kind of that boundary and serves both of those purposes. So trying to match the cross section of the roadway for both of those contexts.
Question. Yeah. So on segment 2, there's a number of intersections. They need receiving lanes for the turn movements. Are those, so you'll have to have the gaps in the raised median. You can't go straight into a travel lane.
Yes, so this is a segment. So this is kind of in between intersections. This is what the cross section would look like. At all of the intersections, it would widen out for turn lanes and receiving lanes as needed. But this is the in between intersections. There would be 1 travel lane in each direction, which is what's out there today.
Well, it's actually, they're under construction right now. The turn lanes and so forth, but just want to make sure we maintain the receiving lanes so people can get out into the middle to safely merge.
Oh, you're talking about left, like a 2-stage left turn lane?
Yeah.
So in our design, there's a center raised median.
Yeah.
Anywhere that there's not a traffic signal. So there would not be left turns permitted on or off of Cordon Road if there's not a traffic signal there.
So any residents between Hazel Green and Silverton Road, they've got to play Frogger and hope to be able to jump clean across to make a left turn.
There's a median.
There's no left turn.
They wouldn't be able to, they'd have to turn right
That's what,
and then do a U-turn.
Or wait until the next signal.
no, they couldn't even make a left turn.
They would take a right turn. You
Yeah.
take a right turn and you do a U-turn at the next traffic signal or roundabout to come back around.
Yes.
Oh. Glad this isn't in Kaiser.
Yeah, but we're coming down.
Okay, thank you. I would never approve it. Go ahead.
Okay, next slide. So moving farther south, this is south of Silverton Road is where the vehicle volumes are significantly higher. So we have widened out to 4 lanes, 4 vehicle travel lanes at this stage, still maintaining the wide shoulders on both sides as well as the wide multi-use path on the west side of Cordon Road. One more. And then the very south segment, this is primarily in the city limits. So the entirety of Cordon Road is within the city jurisdiction here. Again, that 4-lane cross section. The main difference on the south section is that there is multi-use path on both sides of the road, primarily because of the level of development and zoning that exists today and could exist in the future, accommodating bicycle and pedestrian travel on both sides. There's a question.
Anna?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand a little bit about what you were talking about before you move to this segment, which would be limiting the left turn out to go, let's say, southbound on this whole corridor. It looks to me like that would happen for this section as well. So I think what I'm hearing is the whole section will not allow to, excuse me, like if you're on the east side, you can't turn left and go southbound on Cordon.
Correct.
Okay, so really it's going to be access. That's almost an access control move for the entire section, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That would be interesting.
That's a good word. Maria?
Just a couple of questions. One, I was wondering if you could just remind me which of these segments are controlled by who?
That's a great question.
That's a very good question.
Okay, if we don't have that answer,
Well, yeah, and Janelle and Julie can maybe try it, but it's a Cordon Road to the north from Hazel Green to Gaffin, McClay, somewhere in that neighborhood. Kaplinger is a county roadway, but the UGB for the city is on Cordon Road, essentially.
Most of it.
For most of that.
Way up north, it's not.
So there's kind of this difference between the property, right? The adjacent properties are within the city for the most part on the west side of Cordon Road, but the road itself is a county road. Okay. And then south of Kaplinger, it's a city road, and the city limits are on both sides, or it spans the entirety of Cordon Road is within the city.
And Kathlinger, cause it looks like it's kind of like a small street that didn't get put up on this map. Like what is?
Kaplinger is at the very bottom.
Right there.
Yellow, purple.
I see it now. Dang.
All right. Yeah, the purple section, if you start from the south, the whole purple section is city. And then the yellow and the teal are county, and then hazel green is both, right? It goes in and out.
Yeah.
And that's not clear on this because it is.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at this and not the slide, so I don't know if like, it still stands that some of those concerns of like the turn and access to Silverton Road, I see that on this map, it says like a roundabout alternative.
Yes,
Is
yeah,
on.
that's our next slide. Is
Okay.
yeah, look at the.
I'm getting ahead of you.
No, you're great. Where I want you to be going.
Any other question? The Mike has a question.
Yeah, just for clarity's sake. So every place we see an intersection, that is where traffic is allowed both to make left turns off of Cordon Road or from the side street.
Not
That's
every
correct.
intersection, where you see a signal.
Yes.
Every signalized intersection. So at every signalized intersection, left turns are permitted for all directions, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. It's just the smaller streets or individual properties that would be restricted to making lefts.
Right.
Correct.
So in some respects, this is a little bit kind of like Wallace Road, where we have a center median, but we allow left turns at many locations, signalized intersections primarily. But we have a median that doesn't allow left turns at other places.
Yep.
So it's somewhat similar to that, right? To Wallace Road.
Yes, very
And
similar.
I say Wallace Road like north of Glen Creek, where it's
North of Orchard Heights.
it's north of Orchard Heights, right?
Both roundabout, which is really cool. Sadie?
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I don't know on this city portion. I mean, the two northern sections that we have looked at so far don't have pedestrian pathways or sidewalks on both sides, and that would really limit transit's ability to serve people on that route, because presumably after they get somewhere, they'd like to go back to where they came from, as opposed to maybe riding in a loop. Those aren't the best routes for people. And then I don't know on this city section that a multi-use path meets ADA requirements, which we are required to have in place in order to place a stop on a route. And so that would be a concern.
So when we did something similar for our Wheatland Road project design, we have the same configuration. And that is what we're going to be doing, is the wider multi-use, and there's transit along the Wheatland route. I can't speak to the specifics, but I know that there is design that I've seen elsewhere. Yes.
Okay.
I'll leave it to you guys to.
So when you say it's not ADA compliant, are you referring to an asphalt path versus a concrete path? Is that your concern?
I think I am not an expert in, transit compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think it has to do something about the two things that I think play into it. One are curb height and ramp access, and then also it's sort of like a networked system. So you can't just place a concrete pad in one spot and say, well, here, we'll drop off we'll drop them off in their wheelchair right here because right then they're like, well, now I'm here, but it's kind of like an island. And so it needs to be connected to other ADA accessible, pieces of pedestrian infrastructure and I think curb height and to some degree, the width of the path so that it's big enough for a wheelchair. Maybe it has to be big enough for two. Again, I'm not an expert.
So in this, I don't know if this is Lonnie with the county. So we are actually in the process, the county has ADA design standards that we would require on top of this. It goes to a different level of detail than this goes to. The city of Salem also has design standards, and we also have our ADA transition plans. So everything we're designing and building or allowing to be built is required to be ADA compliant. What you're going to see here really is just the width of that path, and that is certainly compliant for ADA. As we move ahead with the projects that will come out of this, this is actually how we build that network for all users through the corridor, right? Because this now identifies the need, the requirement for the multi-use path to be built. So this gets us there to where you're talking about. It just doesn't go to the level of detail. I think that is, would you say?
Bonnie, I think Sadie's point, well, my question is,
Yeah.
I think in section 2 and segment 2 and segment 3, there's not a sidewalk on the east side.
Right.
Okay.
So I think what Sadie was saying is if a bus is going north.
Right.
And drop somebody off in that.
They're not going to drop anybody off.
Right? Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, we will not have the ability to place a stop heading northbound.
In those two sections without a sidewalk on the right side. I think that's what she's saying.
Okay. Yeah. If I could chime in real quickly, we did coordinate with Chariots and they explicitly said there are no transit stops on Cordon Road on this corridor, and they had no plans to add them in the future. They would be dropping off on the local streets that connect to Cordon Road, but they have no plans to put in a route specifically.
Makes sense because of safety reasons, right? I mean, it's a busy road.
Yeah.
Is that what, I think that's what you were saying.
Sorry, I missed it. Yeah.
So that's where, so that we did confirm that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we're treating the east side as rural.
Correct.
And the west side, that's how it's, yeah. Sorry, I missed your point, Katie.
Counselor Phillips?
Yeah, I just want to confirm that in this part that's purple, that's in the city, I don't think there are any like residences that back up to this part of the corridor. So there's no driveways. As long as there's no driveways, I think that, this proposal is okay. And then I guess it's not in the jurisdiction of the city, but the part that's north, it looks like on I'm bad with the names, the Hazelton has the center turn lane because there's a lot of residences, but then I'm just curious, why did they choose not to have like the center lane to do left-hand turns in the northern part of Cordon? It looks like there's a lot of driveways in that section, and that's why they typically have that, center turn lane.
Yeah, I would say the biggest driver for that decision is safety. And yes, there are a lot of driveways in that section, and that's also where the highest density of crashes and fatal and severe crashes are happening. And by eliminating those left turn lanes, you're drastically improving the safety of the corridor.
Okay, so it's literally like we understand based on engineering that like it's going to be difficult for the residences that back up there, but there's so many safety issues that stand out that the recommendation is to build something that creates a force function that really limits residential access. Okay, I can understand that. Thanks for letting me process it.
Sure. And then, before I go back to Sadie, the roundabouts would facilitate smoother functions for that right turn out, getting yourself turned around rather than having to pull a U-turn, which is sharper and more difficult to navigate. And I'm a huge fan of roundabouts, so I'm going to, for safety for all users. And I can even suggest some really pretty art to put in the middle. See,
Thank you, Chair Clark. I love that idea of roundabouts with art. I'm also a big fan. I'm surprised that transit would sort of offer a scenario where no build on sidewalks was a good option for them. But one thing I'm curious about, and I might have more than one question, is I'm looking here at segment 4 and it's showing me 134 to 100 feet of right of way. And I'm assuming that's the variation along that section. And when we looked at the car-centric designs and the people-centric designs, it seemed, and I guess maybe my first question is this an increase in right-of-way dedication?
No, so all of the cross sections that we looked at, it will fit within the existing right of way that exists on the roadway today.
Okay, I think that moots my second question because I was looking at the design where it had the bike lanes and the pedestrian amenities. It seemed like there was maybe a little flexibility in the space because there was like very generous planting strips. And I don't think that when you're separating people from a bicycle, there's the same kind of concern that there is separating people from cars. So it might be possible to tighten it up a bit. But if we're just working within existing right of way, that's not a concern.
Counselor Phillips?
Yeah, I have some questions on this section that's purple that we're looking at right now. I mean, this is a transition between, you know, some of the more rural parts of the city of Salem and the denser parts of Salem. So I'm curious, like, how important is the 6 feet of shoulder, like right next to the 2 lanes of travel for cars? I mean, the wider we build streets, the faster people feel comfortable driving. So I'm just, you know, I want to understand, like, is this because it's a freight corridor? Is this because of like the agricultural interface and there's a lot of heavy rigs going through there that are wide? Because, you know, it would probably save money to not build it as wide, and it would probably make it a bit safer if we were to, you know, shoot for more of the 11-foot width and a narrower shoulder just to encourage people to drive the actual speed limit.
It's the freight.
Yeah, it's a big part of it, especially in that kind of Mill Creek area on the south side. And all of these, we've laid out the 6-foot shoulder as a minimum. However, everything else in here has a range of dimensions. And so when this actually goes to become a project, I think a lot of those trade-offs of vehicle speeds versus shoulder versus multi-use path. One of the things we were trying to think through with this is all the different users. Like you're saying, there are some farm vehicles that still use Cordon Road. The freight piece of it, there's the people who don't want to ride on a multi-use path, and could we also provide some sort of space on the roadway that if they didn't want to ride on the multi-use path and wanted to ride on street level, so trying to fit in as many pieces as we could into this, fully recognizing that as it goes to be designed and construction, that all of those little trade-offs would have to be sorted out for each section of the corridor. But yeah, I think that's a great point, is the making sure that whatever gets built is actually serving the ultimate goal of improving safety for everybody. And part of that consideration is that speed and what the cross section encourages in terms of travel choices and behaviors.
So the other, I'll point out, when we were doing our Wheatland design was for emergency response vehicles. That 11-foot, that's not really helpful for them either. So with some of the larger rigs that need to move in that area. So you have Salem and Marion County Fire both moving vehicles up and down that corridor for response. So they need that larger space. So even if the shoulder is just there, even if it's striped, which does that striping does a great job of directing people's vision and attention to that narrower space. But having that paved area for the overflow of the vehicle, if you will, for these larger emergency response rigs is really important to have. And as a additional comment, putting bicycles in that space is something that I will push hard against every step of the way, and getting them completely separated from motorized vehicles and over onto the multi-use paths. Number one, I can't count the number of times I've almost been run down by somebody riding a bicycle on a sidewalk because they don't want to be in a bike lane next to a motorized vehicle. And number two, where we have the wider paths for both rolling, cycling, and walking, you can spread out a little bit better, but you're away from the large motorized vehicles, especially freight. And this is something that I am personally committed to ensuring that we have them separated as much as possible. I'm gonna go to Maria and then I'll go back to Sadie.
Chair Clark, that comment on like the almost getting run down by a bicyclist also makes me think about how we do have school buses that travel up and down this. And I was just looking at my map. I have like, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4 that are super close to Cordon Road, but I think like a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-ish schools that are like fairly adjacent to Cordon Road. And so I am just a little bit concerned about on the those east sections of segment 2, segment 3 of not having that sidewalk on the east side, because like, I mean, I know that a lot of our school buses are having to stop right in front of these driveways that back up into Cordon. And I just don't want to have a situation where kids are trying to ride their bikes home or something like that. We have had, the school district has had to expand along Cordon Road their range of where kids can get picked up from. Because like, I mean, like once you're outside of like elementary school, like if you live within a mile of the school, you technically should be able to walk. But there's schools here that along Cordon Road where it's just too dangerous for having the kids to walk. So that mostly my point is that I would just hope that maybe we could fit in something a little bit.
Pave it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sadie, then Trevor.
Thank you, Chair Clark. And thank you, Maria, for those comments about students. I'm also, to Trevor's earlier concerns about vehicle speeds and sort of roadway design lending itself to different kinds of, travel behavior when you're in a car. When we have those limited lights and signals, that puts a big distance between the opportunities for a pedestrian to cross, unless they're doing so illegally. And 4 lanes is a lot for a kid to make it across. I wouldn't want to think about a student or anyone attempting to cross. I wanted to just clarify for the consultant group. I'm looking at the comments that were submitted by Transit to the project website. And they say, quote, in support of potential future public transit service on Kuebler Boulevard, Cordon Road, and Hazel Green Road, pedestrian infrastructure should be provided where ADA compliant bus stops would conceivably be built. If speed limits are 40 miles per hour or above, bus pullouts shall be provided as designed for a 40-foot bus in the figure on page 700-11 of the ODOT Highway Design Manual. So I just want to clarify for the group and for the consultants that Transit is supportive of pedestrian infrastructure on both sides.
Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I think it would help me if we went back to, this is like segment 4, if we went back to maybe segment 3. Okay, so And this would be north like of the section 4 that we were just discussing. So I mean, I hear the concerns of Member Carney and Maria Hinojos Presi in regards to having infrastructure just on one side. I guess my questions are, currently there's no infrastructure, like there's no sidewalks on either side in much of these areas. And then is the intent of the up to 12-foot shoulder to kind of function in lieu of having a sidewalk? I understand that like probably saves money, and it acknowledges that on one side of the road is county, and it's better to have some, you know, infrastructure as opposed to none, which is the current state. But it just helped me understand that wider shoulder on the county side, the east side.
Janelle, correct, yeah, so on the east side, that is county, that will remain rural. It's not, there's no foreseeing the UGB expanding in that area to the east. And that 12 to, what is that, 6-foot shoulder, that is paved, that's a paved shoulder. All these are paved shoulders. And so that is, it's basically a path that's not raised, and it's so to stay consistent with the, you know, kind of the landscape and the feel of it being rural, and then also providing the pathway though for someone to walk or bike.
And then I don't know that it makes any difference. Is this considered like a 3/4 improvement as opposed to like the improvement being symmetric on both sides?
No, it's still an improvement. I think
Okay.
I think the east side matches the county standards for a rural roadway.
Yeah, even wider
And
shoulder.
it's an
It's
upgrade from the county standards for the shoulder width to have that wide of a paved shoulder. So
Okay.
I think that's where we landed on this configuration.
And then is there any way to connect, you know, perpendicularly, like if you did have a stop in future that was on the east side for the buses or school or transit, to like be near an intersection and allow people to then cross? Like, is that, can that be worked into this within, you know, the rules and requirements of ADA and other points that other members have brought up? I don't need the answer in specific detail today, but like in future, I would like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's best practice in general for this corridor, any corridor, is to align transit stop locations with infrastructure. And if it doesn't exist, to provide that, you know, like an RFP or some sort of protected crossing, if there were in the future the need for a transit stop that's not adjacent to a signalized location, to provide that connectivity.
Thank you.
Okay. Next,
Okay.
yep.
Keep going. So I think we're past the cross sections now, I think 2 slides. So we kind of briefly touched on this, but the circled intersections here on this map would all be have an upgraded traffic control. So new traffic signals or roundabouts. And so the roundabouts are definitely the traffic control that would improve safety the most, and would also really help facilitate those U-turns that would be required after people turn right out of the local streets and driveways. The roundabouts are specifically focused on the north side, north of Silverton Road, where we do have that 2-lane cross section, as those could be single lane roundabouts. And the project team, looking at funding and feasibility, focused the roundabout recommendation at those locations where they could be single lane roundabouts. On the south end, at some of the signalized locations, we looked at the potential for even a dual lane roundabout, and those were not sufficient to handle the future volume forecasts that we had. So we retained traffic signals farther to the south in the corridor, and focus those roundabouts on the north end.
Love me those roundabouts.
And then just circling back to access management, I know we've had a lot of questions here about limiting that access, and really that at the very beginning of this presentation was the underlying kind of pinpoint of this plan was looking at access and how to manage it to ensure safety, as well as mobility along the corridor. And so this slide has a couple key facts, just to think about as we're talking about limiting access. Every additional driveway on a roadway increases your crash risk by at least 4%. Undivided arterial roadways like Cordon Road have a 55% higher crash risk than a road with a raised median. And for every 10 additional driveways you have per mile, you're also reducing travel speeds. This actually works in our favor because it's not a full movement driveway. So even a right in, right out driveway like we have still reduces travel speeds. But doing so, having that full movement access impacts mobility as well as safety. So really we're trying to balance that need for retaining access to these properties and local streets, but really trying to improve safety and reduce crash risk. And so the plan also outlines strategies and best practices as well as suggested criteria for managing access in the future. And the key part to this is that it's a consistent guideline for the whole corridor. The county has different standards, the city has different standards, and so really our goal was to streamline them and make them consistent. There's also an existing Cordon Road resolution from, I think it's actually 1981, and I typed 1982, but that outlines the need for access restriction along Cordon Road, and is actually quite restrictive in how it's worded. And so this is adding some clarity to that and building upon it. And then we also had the recommendation for those parcels that are requesting permit for access on the county roadway, but are within the city or the UGB, to defer those to city standards, which are more stringent than the county standards right now. And so really trying to, again, have that consistency along the corridor.
And Lacy, I think we just reviewed this. Do you remember how many driveways have been reduced? It was like, since 1981, Max had the number, remember?
Yeah, I don't remember it off the top of my head.
But it's a lot.
It's a lot.
A lot of
It's a lot.
driveways have been eliminated.
Yes, and not where it was like secondary accesses. It's not like we weren't leaving anybody without a way to access their property. But this agreement has been in place for over 40 years already. So when we talk about making access management, like tightening up on it, actually most of the property owners are well aware of this, of the access management needs.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. This won't be a surprise of, oh my gosh, I've been planning to develop or do this on my property and now you're changing it. They're like, this way it's been for 40 years. It's not a surprise to most property owners.
I mean, you know, we always have people that aren't aware, right? But we have been, it already is fairly restrictive, this resolution. So.
Yeah, and we did also, as part of the plan, look at some off arterial connections that maybe some backage roads in the future as properties redeveloped. If that UGB expands and there are 10 parcels adjacent to each other and a developer comes and buys all of them, we have laid out some options for the county as to providing alternate access that's not directly on the Cordon Road and having them build a frontage road or a local street connection to provide that access instead. So there's lots of options. All right, last slide. So there's 35 total projects. So everything we've talked about today, that's a lot, right? To go completely rebuild all of Cordon Road, all the intersections. We know it's going to be a very long-term project, and multiple projects. So we've broken it down into reasonable is subjective, right? What's a reasonably sized project? Maybe more manageably sized projects. We ended up with 35 of them. The really great thing I think about how we split up these projects is, for example, the entire multi-use path is broken up into individual projects. So if there's funding identified, particularly near some of the schools, or there's some key connections, we can break out those pieces of multi-use path and build them as we're able, even if the roadway cross-section isn't funded yet, right? So we're making those improvements to the bicycle pedestrian infrastructure separately from the vehicle roadway cross-section. that we've outlined. And so this is just the 9 projects that have been identified by the city and the county as high priority. There's a lot more in the plan that are medium or low priority. And so you can see the range is anywhere from like 3 to 5 million, all the way up to 26 million for some of these bigger ticket projects. But this kind of gives you an idea of kind of the range of projects that's included. And you'll see the last line there is that multi-use path overcrossing over Highway 22, which we've looked at the potential of that being like a cantilever structure that could make that really important bicycle and pedestrian connection across Highway 22. Even if ODOT doesn't, come to the table and decide to build that interchange, we still recognize the need for that connection itself. So
fantastic. Counselor Phillips?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Clark, and thank you for the presentation. On that last point, the multi-use path over Highway 22, would that be just on one side, that estimate? I know it's a rough estimate, it's early, or is it on both sides?
No, so our plan would be to have it on the west side is where we've laid it out right now, with a way on the south of Highway 22, where we would have the multi-use path on both sides, providing a safe connection for people to get from the east or the west side of Cordon Kuebler to that crossing. And then on the north side of Highway 22, the multi-use path is just on the west side. So it would connect into that infrastructure.
Thank you.
All right.
That's all we've got.
Maria.
I know that we've definitely like talked these segments to death, and I don't know if it would be from y'all or from staff. Are there any concerns for segment 3 with the recently approved FOB boundaries, the federal aid urban boundaries? And I mean, I don't know if I'm misremembering some pieces of the last meeting, but there's a couple of sections that got added in on the county side, I think. And so like, we're good, right? With like the step with the updated standards.
So are you, let me clear, are you specifically talking about not having pedestrian facilities on the east side of Cordon Road? Is that what what are you referring to?
That's essentially, I just want to make sure that like we're, crossing our T's, dotting our I's with like what just recently got included on the FOB on that east side. Yeah.
It's a really good question. I don't actually, do you remember off the top of your head where the FOB ended here?
I didn't think we were changing anything with the UGBs.
See, it's definitely
inclusive, so I'm fairly.
Yes, and I actually think it goes beyond UGB right here. So I do think it includes this. So I'm trying to.
I was looking at the packet from from last month, and I know like Sunnyview to Swagel, there was like a little chunk there on the east side, and then
I think you're right. So this becomes the standard for it, and it doesn't. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, because what we talked about was the urban versus rural with the FOB and how.
I just essentially want to make sure that like
I think we're good.
Marion County wouldn't get in trouble with anything.
Yes, I think we're good, because this actually defines the cross section that we need for this, regardless of urban or rural.
Okay.
Right? I think we're good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, it's good. I just want to make sure we're we're good.
Cool. Sadie.
Thanks, Chair Clark. I just wondered, I don't know if it's possible to drop an email in the chat so that I could forward a copy of these comments to the consultants so they have them both on the record and for their consideration as they move forward with project planning and alternatives. Or if it's in the packet, I didn't see anything.
Also, we always download the recording and the chat and the attendance, and forward the chats to the consultants.
Is it the
okay? Okay, yeah. If you wanted to do that, that'd be great, because
and Jenna's currently logged in, so she's
okay
to the meetings and she has the chat content.
Perfect. Thank you.
You good?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this aside from when do we go to construction? Starting off with that wonderful roundabout at Hazel Green and Cordon, which I will, once this is adopted, I will go to town after I get Brook Lake on getting these funded. Love the roundabouts and the safety, and we've noticed that. I do have one additional question. As I understand it, Cordon Road is also the alternative when there is a shutdown on I-5. And this has to be included in the plan to allow for that diversion of traffic from I-5 in an emergency.
So we have talked to ODOT, Marion County, City of Salem. It is not an official detour. ODOT does not designate it as an official detour. And we have looked at a pretty extensive big data set and looked at incidents on I-5 over the last several years and mapped the travel patterns and travel times on Cordon Road, on Lancaster, on the other parallel routes. And it's not used. Cordon Road is not heavily used. People find their own routes through Salem. They do not divert. And ODOT has not set up an official detour onto Cordon Road in like the last 25 years, I think.
Because there's that one blocked off kind of a dedicated eastbound to southbound that's got a chain across it at Cordon and Hazel Green for that purpose.
That'll go away when you do your roundabout or your signal.
I'm really good about the roundabout. Roundabout.
Yeah, nobody has any history of that ever being utilized.
I can think of it once actually. Anna?
Thank you, Chair Clark. I appreciate you bringing that up because I was thinking about that when they were going over the cross sections of Cordon and you know what kind of traffic we're going to accommodate for that. I can tell you that I live in Northeast Salem, and if there's something going on I-5, absolutely people use Cordon Road as a detour. Now maybe it's not an official detour, but there have been times where that, and even at peak hour, when I'm going home, Cordon Road is just stacked up with folks either coming from Portland or I don't know where they're going, but it's pretty busy. But specifically, just back to that point about there's a problem on I-5. Yes, absolutely, people use that. Now, if it's not an official detour, ODOT saying it's not an official detour, then I understand that, but it is utilized that, and there are trucks, big trucks that use that road. So anyway, and by the way, great presentation, thank you. I love any project that comes out of this planning study because it's not pretty over here. So thank you.
Well, and Northeast Salem continues to need, and Southeast, the east side, the investment that is happening. Lancaster and going east is something that I've noticed here, I've noticed in the act, and I've noticed in our community that there's a really significant focus on ensuring that there is equitable development of facilities, of resources, amenities on the east side. And I want to congratulate everybody who is really paying attention to the needs of our community members, particularly Lancaster and going east. It's showing there are improvements coming, and applaud that investment. I do want to plant the bug though back on this bypass notion. In the event of Cascadia, the I-5 overpasses, I don't know how dirty they are. I know the newer ones are built to a very high level, but Cordon Road does not have bridges. I-5 does. So in the event of Cascadia, has that been considered as part of the resiliency for this region? I'll put that out there. I know Lancaster is pretty much flat also, Yahoo, and so is Hawthorne on the east side of I-5, west side of I-5.
As we improve Lancaster, it's more like this. It's not flat. It's easy because we're putting new curbs and things. In the county, I don't know what the city's.
Well, and definitely making improvements where, especially at Lancaster and Market and on Sunnyview. No, farther south of that, not Sunnyview. Anyway, it's a mess, needs to be improved. Yeah, we love that, but I want to go back to that notion, making sure really comprehensive on looking at our regional resiliency. We all talk Cascadia, but there's other stuff that happens between now and whenever that happens. Just a thought. Sadie.
Thank you, Chair Clark, and thank you for the resiliency and hazards planning awareness. I try not to think about that as often as I probably could. I just this is kind of a small scale comment. First, thank you for the presentation and the opportunity to share Chariot's comments with the group. Just as any kind of like safe pedestrian passage to Anna's point on Cordon Road is going to be an improvement. The times I have ridden my bicycle on that corridor are pretty hair-raising and not very frequent occasions. Just one thing, as I was looking at the schematic, I noticed that the median between travel lanes is planted with trees. And I wonder, in order to offer kind of like a human scale to the pedestrian path, and maybe a little bit of increased separation as opposed to just a planted strip, maybe trees in that strip would be appropriate as well, to just provide that greater separation. And I think people like walking in the shade when it's available. Just a thought. And I'm going to have to jump off to join another meeting. I apologize to the group, but I think Sarah Duncan, who is my alternate, is present today, so I'm happy to turn things over to her.
Madam Chairman, those are the kinds of design things that would be, I mean, that's way out in the future when they go to build those things, that kind of detail.
Thank you, Sadie. And yes, what will go in there, especially that is going to be appropriate in terms of the root systems and things like that.
20 years from now, things could be different.
Well, we've got a really good street tree list if you want to borrow it. Just saying. City of Kaiser is always happy to share. Ours was developed by a local arborist
in my area.
Yeah, you do. I don't think we want to
Plant those.
No, we won't. We are going to plant bird trees.
I think you'd have a heck of a time moving them in.
Probably. Okay, and with that, Councilor Phillips.
Sorry, thank you, Chair Clark. This is just to echo your point on resiliency. Cordon Road is pretty flat, but there are, I think, 3 significant areas that could be of concern, where it goes over the railroad, Mill Creek, and then of course Highway 22. So, you know, looking at those things moving forward will need to be done.
Okay. Well, this is fantastic work. We look forward to the updates as this moves along. And thank you so much for the great work on this project. All right, we are going to go past item E, which is looking like it's going to be in November. Steve, on the tip modifications. We do not. We have no voting items.
No voting items. This is just a.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner, and all the best to you.
Thank you. Next time you see me, I'll be a married man.
That's right. Congratulations. Go to the chapel and get Sorry, couldn't resist. Mike? See your hand.
I'm muted. Before we totally skip over the MPO discussion, I just wanted to say that you saw my email that went out yesterday. We wanted to postpone. Councilor Phillips asked to postpone the discussion until Mayor Hoy could join us. And then we were going to postpone it till next month, but then we've heard from Marion County staff that Commissioner Cameron cannot attend the October meeting. So we're pushing it back to November. as I said earlier in this process, that we're in no big rush to make the decision. It's on your timeline, so we will accommodate. And we want to have everyone there for this discussion. So little background so everyone's aware where we stand on that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Okay, tip mods.
Okay, so I'm gonna share it on the screen. This is the last page in the packet because it's not super easy because of the large number of modifications on there. So I apologize for that. But essentially we typically every month have like 3 or 4 tip modifications. In this case, we have 17. And the real reason is because we are right now transitioning from the 2021 to 24 STIP to the 24 to 27 STIP. So the vast majority of these are just administrative moves that took projects that were programmed in 2023 and then pushed them to federal fiscal year 2024 so that they could still be used in the new tip. So in all these cases, there wasn't an impact to any SCATS funding, or I think there might have been the very first one is an instance that we talked about last month, which was the battery electric bus addition and approval for purchase by Chariots. But all the rest of these were administrative amendments and didn't impact any new funding coming to our region. So just a list of administrative changes. I'm happy to talk about any of them specifically if anyone wants to, but the majority of these are programmatic transit projects, things like regular preventive maintenance and operations and capital projects. So my report, unless there's any questions.
And for folks who have who love all the different fiscal years, the federal fiscal year starts on Sunday, October 1st.
Sure does.
So
Seriously.
they have to be special.
Always.
Yep. Thank you so much for keeping track of all of those. Much appreciated. Other business, the Oregon Transportation Commission will meet on November 9th in Portland, and December 11th will be a virtual meeting for the OTC. The next SCAS meeting will be on October 24th, and we'll be adopting or considering the adoption of, I can't presume, but we love this project, McGilchrist and 22nd. And then we'll have a presentation on the Chariots Transportation Options Strategic Plan. Looking forward to that. Woo! And then the next TAC meeting will be on October 10th. And then you also have the status of 3 of our planning projects, the Metropolitan Transportation Safety Action Plan, the Oregon Travel Study, the update to the Turner TSP, and then we will continue the discussion on adding Almsville to our MPO. And that will be in November.
Can you remind me what TSP stands for?
Transportation System Plan.
Thank you.
I have to look at that one. Remember, I'm not cooking where it stands for cheesecake. All right. Anything else for the order today?
Nothing.
Happy fall, y'all. Everybody feel better. And we will see you next month. We are adjourned. It is 1:13.
Wow.
Bye.